Please rise. Please quiet. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, thank you. Madam Secretary, if we could have a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. President. Division 7, Gary Van Dam.
Here.
Division 6, Audrey Miller.
Here.
Division 5, Robert Paris.
Here.
Division 2, Keith Dias.
Here.
Division 1 is vacant. Division 3, Frank Donato.
Here.
Division 4, George Lane.
Here.
General Manager Knutson.
Here.
General Counsel Kim.
Here.
And Holly Hughes present.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. The next item is a voluntary public roll call. Anybody's listening in, and we usually have some good representation from the community. If you'd like to identify yourself, we'd appreciate hearing from you.
Hi, George.
Vincent Dino, Pumpkin Water District.
Welcome.
John Eucasted, AV Mutual Group.
Welcome, John.
John Joyce with the adjudicated Lake LA News.
John, George, good to hear from you.
Kim Domingo with the Roseman Community Services District.
Okay, very well. We appreciate everybody listening in. We'll move on to item number 5, public comments, and period open to the public. So if anybody would care to address the board now, and the item's not on our agenda later on, you feel free to do so at this point. Okay, item number 6A1, adoption of our agenda. And so a motion would be in order.
I make a motion we adopt it.
I'll second it.
Director Dias, Director Donato, a second. If there's no further discussion, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. That brings us down to approval. We've got it. Yes. Okay, that'll bring us down to item number 8A1, which is number.
Mr. President, we're on number 7. And I move we approve the consent calendar.
Excuse me. Yeah, thank you.
And I'll second.
Yeah, okay, we have a motion in a second. No further discussion. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you, Ron. And that'll move us to item number 8A, water rates and capacity fee in a committee. This is something the board has to do sometimes yearly, sometimes we'll put it on a 3-year basis, but we've had a committee that's been very active, working with this, and the board is met with, or staff has met with some of our customers, and we're always very concerned and sensitive to the water rates. And I think at this point, we would turn it over to, we would open our public hearing. And so a motion would be in order to open a public hearing regarding the water rates.
I'll move to go into public hearing on the water rates.
Second. Okay, we have a motion, a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. So that'll be 5:34. We'll open the public hearing. Everybody will have a chance to speak and talk and be able to address the board. But then I think we'll start with our general manager. Matt, would you care to begin with this?
Yes, thank you, President Lane. Good evening, board and customers. So, little background before I turn it over to Sadir Pardiwala, who is with Raftellus Financial Consultants, who helped the agency prepared this year's financial planning update, as well as the recommended rate adjustment. So we've met with the the Water Rate and Capacity Fee Committee a couple of different times over the last month or two, and we went through, you'll see the presentation tonight, same presentation that we went through with the committee. Got feedback from the committee members on some of the assumptions that were built into the 5-year financial model. So you'll see that this evening. At the end of the presentation, I'll explain the process that we went through with meeting with our customers and seeking feedback from the customers. But just a little background before I turn it over to Sadir with Raftellus. You may remember we've utilized Raftellus financial consultants for the past probably 7 years or so to go through the update of our 5-year financial model and make recommendations to this board for adoption of any rate adjustments. That process has worked well. Sadir has many years of experience doing these types of studies. Sadir not only has a financial background, but he also has an engineering background, so it's kind of unique in our business. And they've done numerous rate studies for various municipalities in Southern California, even a few up in Northern California. They've done some work for Metropolitan Water District and some of their retail customers, as well as other state water contractors like Avek. So with that, unless the committee would like to add anything, but we could turn it over to Sadir and go through the presentation this evening. Take it away, Sadir.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the board. This is Sudhir Pardiwala with Raftellus Financial Consultants. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge Ellsbury Mullins, who's also on the line, and Charles Diamond, who have been assisting me with developing the rates, the financial plan, and the rates for the agency. So today what we want to do is to review the financial plan, review the assumptions, and come up with a couple of scenarios for your consideration, review the rates for FY 2024, and feel free to ask questions as we go along if they come up. We don't have to wait till the end, but we do have a session at the end where we can also have discussion and questions. Next slide, please. So we've been doing the agency's rates every year for the last several years, as Matt mentioned. And typically we do a 5-year plan, even though we implement rates only for 1 year. This year we are looking at doing something a little bit different, and we'll go to that. Our study period is still going to be the 5 years going from FY 24 to FY 28. The financial plan includes some key inputs and outputs. We'll review those as well. The main outputs are the cash flow projections, which give us an idea about the reserves that are important to meet the district's financial goals, and the annual revenue adjustments that are needed to ensure that we have adequate revenues to meet your expenses, operating and capital. The revenue adjustment basically allows us then to update our rates, which we have been doing for the last several years. The updated financial plan results are used to determine the rates, obviously, for the next year, this is going to be a change because we have been basically doing updates, rate updates effective the calendar year beginning in January. And this is the first time that we'll be actually doing it on the fiscal year, which will then also match the agency's budgeting year as well. One of the things that we are considering in this study is implementing a multi-year rate schedule, and I'll review that as well in the next slide. So as I said, currently the agency has been adopting rate for 1 year at a time and then reviewing the rates every year to ensure that they meet the requirements. The agency is looking to see if they can do a multi-year rate increase, which is quite common in this business. Many agencies will do 5-year, retail agencies typically do 5-year financial plans and rates. Wholesale agencies typically do maybe 2 to 3 years, and AVAC is potentially looking at doing a 3-year program. There are some pros and cons associated with this approach. Some of the pros involve, customers that can have ample time to develop their own financial plans and rates that then allow them to set up their budgets easily, given the fact that they have some idea as to what the future looks like. It's also a more efficient use of resources, involves fewer staff and consultant hours, less expenses for the agency, and it provides flexibility to the agency. If there are changes in conditions, you always have the option of going back and revisiting the financial plan and rates. The cons basically are, the reduced ability to ever-changing financial conditions. So if things change and you don't go ahead and update your rates, and obviously that may have an impact on your finances. And then as we go into the future, we are making estimates of what your expenses, both operating and capital, would be, and as also the amount of water that we sell, which are projected in the first year. So that gives us a reduced accuracy of rate projections going into the future. Next slide, please. So there were some key changes to the inputs that we incorporated in the current financial plan. Some of the major ones were the increase in the operating expenses. In FY22, we had a budget of $25.7 million. In 23, that budget went up to $28.4 million. The other major change was the payoff of the outstanding COPS certificates of participation, the Series 2008 debt, which was $45 million. This was done primarily to save interest payments on the variable debt. As you are aware, the interest rates on short-term interest rates have gone up significantly. And so paying off this debt issue would help the agency save money in the long run. There's also been an increase in the CIP. As you can see, the prior update, we had a 5-year CIP of $20.6 million. In the current update, we are looking at about $22.1 million per year, which these numbers are not adjusted for inflation. So inflation will cause those numbers to change slightly. On the revenue and expense side, we have also made certain assumptions to make projections going forward. We have assumed that there is not going to be any increase in the total water accounts. So in essence, we would be projecting off of the latest water consumption records. The property tax revenue will be increasing at 2%. This is a little conservative, given that that's the amount that the assessor typically is restricted in terms of ongoing property taxes. There could be slightly higher property taxes as a result of changes in ownership and/or any increases in growth, which we have assumed to be zero in this case. And then miscellaneous revenues are also projected at the current rate, so we are not assuming any increases in those as well. The expense assumptions are more critical to make sure that we are recovering adequate revenues. And given the current environment, inflation environment, we have assumed in the first year for FY24, the inflation costs are going to be higher. So we are assuming 5% general inflation costs for FY24, and then dropping down to 3%, which is more normal, and what we have been using in previous years. Personnel costs are expected to increase at 4% per year. and water purchase, delivery, and treatment cost at 5%, which is typical in the environment that we are facing with restricted water supplies. The capital improvement program, again, for the first year in FY24, we are assuming a 4% inflation adjustment and then dropping down to 3% for the subsequent years. So we use these projections to make estimates of the expenses in future years to compare against the revenue so that we can determine the overall revenue adjustment that is needed to meet these expenses. Next slide. One of the more important assumptions that we have to make is the amount of water that we are selling. And I guess that's not on this slide, sorry. So the other assumptions on revenues are that we are include replacement water, which we are assuming is held at the constant level that we had last year. The high desert water bank recovery fees, which were estimated by staff, we've taken those into consideration. And additional lab income due to updated fees, which is also held constant at what we've been earning in the last year. On the expense side, the expenses for replacement water provided to the water master are inflated at 5%, the same as what we have assumed for our water cost projections. And obviously the reduction in the debt-related issues due to the early payoff of the certificates of participation. Did somebody have a question? No? Okay. One of the more important assumptions that we have in our model is the amount of water sales. In the prior update, we had assumed 42,700 acre feet per year for the FY22 to FY26, based on the 21 actuals in 21. In the current budget, the agency has estimated only 35,000 acre feet, which was as a result of the drought that we were facing earlier in the year, which is about the same as what we did in FY22. So going forward for 24 to 28, we are assuming about 40,000 acre feet per year. Obviously, the more water that we sell, the more revenue that we get from the sales of water. So this is a very important assumption that is critical to our financial plan update. One of the important CIP projects is the South-North Intertype project, SNP Phase 2, which is costing approximately $56 million in the next couple of years. It is assumed that of this 56 million, 44 million will be grant funded, and the remaining 12 million would be debt funded at 4% interest for 30 years with an issuance cost of 1.5%. So this is what we're assuming that the agency will be doing in terms of issuing debt in fiscal year 2025.
Can you go back, please? I have a question. So what I read here is you're anticipating that the SNP line is going to cost $100 million?
$56 million.
Yeah, maybe I can take this, Sudhir.
Because he says cost $56 million, then it goes down, assume a $44 million grant. So
yeah, I can explain that a little bit. So the first line where it's the estimated cost of the SNP project is $56 million. That's the estimated all-in cost. And to fund that project, we did assume in the financial model that we would get a good chunk of that through grant money, but we wanted to account for the possibility of having to issue some debt if we wanted to go forward with that project.
So what do you mean some debt?
So we're assuming 25% roughly will come from the agency funds. So that could be paid for out of reserves or through issuing new debt.
Okay, but where's the 4% interest rate come from?
That would be so tied to the new debt that we would potentially
We
issue.
don't charge ourselves interest.
No, if we go out and issue a new bond, a water revenue.
Wait. Are you saying going out and get another bond?
That's what this assumption is made. It's not committing the agency to that. We want to be conservative in the financial plan to
That doesn't
account
make
for.
any sense. After we paid off Wells Fargo $45 million, we should have paid them off less and kept enough money so we wouldn't have to go out and get another bond.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get away from bonds.
Yeah, I mean, our goal obviously is to get 100% paid through by grants, but again, just as far as financial planning, we wanted to be conservative and not underestimate the funding we needed to complete that project.
Yeah, Matt, where are we discussing that as far as the water rates? Because the water rates is not going to be obligated for that.
So all these assumptions that Sadir just went through, including the assumption of issuing new debt to complete this project, do factor into the long-term reserve levels and the rates needed to cover the debt service coverage for the agency.
That's what I was getting to. So basically, this is, by the way, this right now, this has been modified. It's the first time I've seen this. I mean, there's always been discussion, but one of the things is I didn't know about any more new bonds. That's number one. And number two, the SNP line, I never thought we would be incorporating the funds from the build that SNP line into our existing water rate. I mean, that was not really discussed at the water rates meeting. Do you remember that?
No.
Okay, so I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but I think the committee should have been involved in that discussion that we were going to raise some of the water rate percentage that we're going to see tonight would also incorporate funding if we had to the SNP line.
Yeah.
So I didn't kind of threw me off guard.
Yeah. Are you going to say something, Audrey?
Yeah, I thought we were discussing that we might be able to get the grant money to cover the whole project.
Yeah,
We
and
have some.
that is correct. We have some grant funding now, about $6 million, and our goal is to get the rest through state funding or through a grant. But again, we wanted to make sure that we weren't cutting ourselves short, that we didn't plan for any expense associated with the project. And
But are we talking at all about water rates paying for part of this?
yes,
We are?
yes, that's
No,
correct.
the board has always been very adamant, not of existing customers pay for new customers.
Well, a portion of that project benefits existing customers.
Well,
It's not all.
Not really, Matt. It's existing customers are being served now.
Yeah, they are, but this project provides them
Well,
reliability.
that's stretching it.
Well, the question, Mr. President, is that portion of it had never, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have vision. That's not what I'm saying here, but it's not what we discussed to add into the rate.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we maybe shouldn't, but I'm not comfortable. I'm not going to support any of this right here to increase the water rate. If we're even short, we're going to have to figure another mechanism. And I don't like that word bonds anymore. I think we've worked very hard as a board to eliminate $45 million worth of bonds and then go back and borrowing a little bit of money. I don't think the timing is right now for that. So maybe we need to refigure that calculation.
Yeah.
Another direction, or whoever's really benefiting from the SNP line, maybe we should have something agreement on the side that they need to participate financially. We never asked D40 to participate into this. It's always put on AVAC, and then AVAC has to spread it out to everybody out there, and it's something we should be discussing as a committee before it gets to the board.
It doesn't appear like the Water Rates Committee is comfortable with this proposal.
Well, I'm just not comfortable with this part of it. If it means, if this is increasing the water rate with a percentage that was going to be brought up to the ratepayers, I think this part should be maybe possibly tabled or something.
So I apologize if you missed this as part of the water rate committee, but this information was included in the model and the presentation for the water rate committee. So we haven't changed.
The bonds was the use of the bond. Okay, now you maybe use different terminology, but you said if we were short, that's why the interest rate caught me. I knew nothing about we're going to go out and get bonds.
Yeah, but where I was going with it is it doesn't change the end result that you'll see tonight. It's the same end result that was presented to the water rate committee because it included this assumption at that time.
Okay.
Okay, let's continue with the presentation, please.
Next slide. So this gives you a pictorial view of the funding of the capital improvement cost. The blue bar is the amount that will be funded through rates. The orange bar is what we have assumed potentially would be debt funded, which we just talked about. And then the green bar represents the amount that would be grant funded. So you can see, again, most of the expense in in FY25 and FY26 is grant funded, with small amounts being funded through debt and some amount being funded through rates. The rest of the CIP is being funded through rates and reserves. Next slide, please. One of the important elements of the financial plan is the requirement to meet the district's financial policies. And we have a couple of them. One is the debt coverage, and the other one relates to reserve policy. The debt coverage, as you are aware, is basically the ratio of the net revenue to debt service, net revenue being revenues minus expenses, not counting capital expenses. And our debt typically involved having a coverage of 1.1. That means the net revenue was at least 110% of the debt service. The district has been much more conservative in establishing a target ratio of 1.75, meaning that your net revenue should be at least 175% of the debt service. On the reserve policy, we have several reserves: the operating reserve, drought contingency reserve, capital improvement and replacement reserve, the state water project contract reserve, and then the post-employment benefit liability reserve. On the operating reserve, the minimum and the maximum targets are both set at 12 months of the annual operating expenses. The drought contingency reserve is set at 7% of the budgeted water sales at a minimum and up to 20% of the budgeted water sales revenue. The capital improvement reserve is set at a minimum of 1 year CIP costs and the maximum up to 5 years of CIP costs. The state water project contract reserve is set at minimum at 50% of the annual state water project cost up to a maximum of 100% of the annual budgeted state water project costs. And the OPEB reserve is set basically at 100% of the OPEB liability. One of the elements that need to be considered over and above these targets is that the minimum reserve target is equal to the higher of the sum of the minimum targets or 200% of the annual operating expenses, including depreciation. So it is subject to two different standards depending on how they turn out. Next slide, please. So going back a little bit into history, what we see here are the annual revenue adjustments that the agency has been implementing for the last 5 years. So in 2018 through 2020, we were updating our annual revenue adjustments by 7.5% per year. In 21 and 22, we reduced that down mostly because of COVID. In 21, we were down to 2.5% and then bumped it up a little bit in 22 to 5%. So this has been the history of the 5 years worth of revenue adjustments at the agency. Next slide. Next slide, please. I think we missed one. So we have prepared the financial plan, and based on our projections, we have come up with two different scenarios. And in the first scenario, we are assuming, or we have estimated, a 5% adjustment every year for 5 years. And the second revenue adjustment scenario, we are proposing 7.5% per year. And what we will see is the impact resulting from these two scenarios on our reserve levels, which will give us an idea as to which scenario we should potentially be considering. Next slide, please. So we have shown the reserves in two different ways. We have separated the state water contract reserve, which we did last year, and the remaining reserves are shown separately. And then we've also shown the combined reserves, so you get an idea as to what the total financial position of the district looks like. Okay, next slide, please. So on the upper left-hand corner, we have the state water project contract reserve, and the bars represent the reserve levels. The minimum at 50% of the annual state water project cost and 100% of the state water project cost are shown by the two lines, the red line and the blue line. As you can see, with the assumptions that we have made, we will be exceeding the maximum reserve that we have, the agency has planned for or has set up in its policies going into the next several years. By 2028, we expect to see at least $55 million in the reserve compared to a target of about $32 million. On the operating capital side, which is the bottom left-hand figure, you can see the reserve balances, which are shown in the blue bars, and the minimum line represented by the red line, the red dashed line, and the maximum line represented by the blue. You can see the blue line as the CIP decreases. We can see that the maximum line is also coming down, trending downwards. But as you can see, that we do not meet our target, the minimum target, starting in 25 through 28 with the 5% annual revenue adjustments. However, on the combined reserve, which is shown on the right-hand side, you can see that the combined reserve is meeting the minimum target through FY26 before it drops below the minimum in the following 2 years.
I have a question, Matt.
Sure.
Yes.
The way I read this, I remember this. So basically, if we allow the first scenario, I want a clarification, is that we're to be digging our reserves just to keep even.
Yeah, just to summarize what this shows, if you look at the bar chart on the right, it combines the two. Combines the state water project reserves and the capital and O&M reserves. So, as Sudhir mentioned, and Director Denal is right, over the next 5 years, if we went forward with 5% annual rate adjustments, so 5% each year, we would start approaching that minimum or the red dash line in a few years, and that's eating into the agency's reserves based on the assumptions that we've made in the financial model. We're making assumptions on water sales, we're making assumptions on increased cost, etc. So if everything were to hold true in the financial model, this is what would happen with our reserve levels. We're still very close to the minimum target, but we are dipping down slightly below that. In about 4 years. And you'll see on the next chart, which is the 7.5% scenario, it shows that we stay well above that minimum target if we implemented 7.5% each year.
So one of the
Hopefully,
things,
does that help answer your
I
question?
know, I understood that. I just want to make sure all six of us understand
Yeah.
the same thing we're reading here.
Yep.
Because before we go to the 7.5.
Yeah.
And do you, if everything is correct, that is projected, how much money will we have to dip into reserves
To maintain.
Without,
So if you look at just the bar chart, the green bar chart, we're looking at ending the current fiscal year at about 115 million in reserves. So the first year we would dip in, what would that be? About 16 million over the first
Right.
year, and then about 5 million each year after that, until it flatlines in 2026.
you're saying that we'd absorb 15 million in reserves if we stay at the 5%?
Yeah, and maybe just to highlight one significant component of that dollar amount is buying banked water. You remember the board authorized about 13 million for us to proceed with purchasing as much state water project supplies and bank it in the groundwater basin. That comes directly out of reserves. And then it gets expensed once that water is pumped out and delivered to our customers. So that's probably the biggest portion of that. Would you agree, Teresa? Is buying that banked water.
How many acre feet is that?
We're estimating about 60,000, 55, 60,000 acre feet.
We have to take that water. There's no, that's what I hear in the field every day, dumping water in the ocean.
Yeah.
And I tell people now that we're taking as much as we possibly humanly can under our facilities. In fact, the entire state is, because we can't get any more water down the East Branch.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
That's correct. There's a bottleneck at Bear Block.
So, and all our reservoirs you're going to show us later are all full, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So that's a big portion of the decrease in reserve levels. And then you see it does stay pretty flat from 2024 through 2028. But the biggest decrease is that roughly 13 million to buy banked water. Or buy water to bank.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah. Matt, how do we account for our banked water?
So we use the first in, first out method on the financial side. So when we, like this year, we're buying 55, 60,000 acre feet of Table A or State Water Project supplies. And that funding comes right out of reserves to pay for it. And then it gets capitalized. And then when we go to deliver it, pump it out of the ground and account for that, it's the first in or first out. So we're delivering the first in at that time, and then we expense it once it gets sold to our customers.
But is the banked water part of our reserves?
So we do capitalize it. So it shows up on the treasurer's report and has a dollar value associated with it.
Right.
So it's part of our assets. It's part of our overall assets.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
One thing I want to bring up too is that City of Palmdale, different districts have been, and even some of the farmers are begging us to recharge Amagosa Creek. And if you go by there, it's been topped off, and somebody's got to pay for that.
Yeah.
So we're the first one to pay for it, and they're going to pay us back.
Yeah, and then we get reimbursed.
Right.
Down the road.
So I just wanted to bring that up to everybody.
What's that taking? 7 acre feet?
John, it's about 5.5 acre feet per day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what's the yearly amount of acre feet? Yeah. Is it like 5,000 or 6,000 acre feet?
I think I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
How come we don't max that out, John, since we have all this Table A water?
that we are maxing it out, and it's actually overflowing.
That's where I said,
ponds and
oh,
going into the creek.
you gotta go see it.
Oh, okay.
We just can't let it get to that low.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I had to stop somebody fly fishing over there the other day.
And just to put it in perspective, that's 5.5 acre feet per day at that location. At the West Side Water Bank, we're doing about 200 acre feet a day.
That particular facility where they're having problems is the AV Country Club, and that will help recharge that whole area in the near future.
Yeah.
We're also banking at Big Rock, aren't we?
No, we're not banking. We're banking at Little Rock Creek right now. Yeah.
But that's part of the equation.
Mr. President, you asked the question. I want to make sure I understand the reason we have to pay with the reserves for this extra Article 21 water is because we didn't have planning in advance for that, or the reserves are meant to do this if we have to. We've taken a lot of water. I don't think anybody expected us to take as much water, and there's a cost to that water for transportation costs.
Yeah, that's just the way we've done it in the past, and that's the reason why we want to have a healthy reserve level, is take advantage of these opportunities. When the water is available, we have funding to pay for it, knowing that at some point we're going to sell that water and recoup cost.
Right.
That is good financial policy because you don't want to charge for something that you're not selling. So this is it actually adds to your reserve, so to speak, not cash reserves, but your overall assets.
Yeah, and it helps even out the rates. If we needed to recoup all that funding in one single year, the rates would spike high.
And Article 21 does not go against our Table A allocation.
Correct.
But it still cost us, what, $200 an acre foot?
Yeah, probably closer to 250, 260. Yeah.
I'm just mistaken.
Matt, was there any discussion as far as more we raise these rates, there's going to be less sales? Was that it doesn't appear that was part of any equation, any thought process?
Yeah, and if you remember, Sadir showed that we're estimating a slight increase this year in water sales just because we're coming out of the drought. The major customers like Quartzsale Water District and LA County Water Works have been using their groundwater production facilities very hard last couple years during the drought. So they both indicated they're going to drop off a little bit of their groundwater production, and they want to purchase as much imported water as we have available. So we don't foresee a drop off in water sales based on the rate discussion this evening. We're estimating right around 40,000 acre feet. We think that's a conservative estimate of water sales for the next 5 years.
Right, and then that 70-30, that's done with Kumar too, wasn't it?
Yeah, you're talking about the requirement that LA County has to buy 70% of their demand. Yeah.
Right. So that's went away.
Yeah, that went away once the ramp down was completed. Yeah, but LA County continues to buy a healthy amount of AVAC supply. They're 75% plus of our overall demand.
Really?
Yeah.
One
So
additional point I'd like to make here is that we are looking at a 3-year scenario here. So, after FY26, the district would have the option of increasing the rates so that we, again, meet the minimum balance if necessary. So in FY26, which is the end of the 3-year period, we are basically meeting our minimum target. Just to make that clear, yeah, you always have the option of increasing your rates in FY27 and beyond, yeah.
And so just to summarize, this scenario that you see on the screen is based on a 5% rate increase each year. The next slide shows scenario 2 at 7.5%. So if you want to go through this, Sadir.
Yeah, basically, the same charts that we displayed in the previous slide, you can see on the right-hand side, basically that the overall reserves in the district will be meeting the minimum requirement in all the 5 years if we stay with the 7.5%. So it's a more conservative scenario in terms of doing the revenue adjustments. But as I mentioned, the 5% scenario for the first 3 years also would allow you to meet that minimum target that we established and then potentially have higher rates if necessary in the following 2 years. Okay. Next slide. Debt coverage is another important element in our financial plan. And again, what you see here are the minimum and the maximum requirements for debt coverage. The minimum line is represented by the purple line. The maximum target is represented by the green line, and the red line represents the actual debt coverage that the agency will meet. So as you can see, we fall just below, if you do the 7.5%, we fall just below the maximum in 25, and then from 26 onwards, we are above the maximum target that we have established. If you do the 5%, it takes us into 27 before we actually exceed that maximum target, but we are above the minimum in both the scenarios.
And just to clarify, the reason for that red line increasing in future years, a combination of a couple things. It's paying off the $45 million variable rate bond. So we're avoiding those principal payments coming up in future years. And then our 2016 series COPs or water revenue bonds, those principal payments start to decrease in a couple years. So therefore, our debt service coverage ratio increases when those principal payments come down.
Which is represented.
Did I say that correctly, Teresa? Yeah. All right.
You can see as the slope changes, that's when the debt payments start to reduce. Yeah. Okay, next slide, please. So based on the financial plan with the 5% and the 7.5% revenue adjustments, the rates established for under the two scenarios are displayed on this chart here. The current rate for MNI, municipal treated water, is $6.99. Under the 5% scenario, it goes up to $7.34. Under the 7.5%, it goes up to $7.52 in the first year. The untreated water goes up from $4.81 to $5.06 or $5.18. The ag water, untreated water goes up from $4.66 to $4.90 under the 5% and $5.01 under the 7.5% scenario. The ag treated water goes up from $6.76 to $7.10 with the 5% increase and $7.27 with the 7.5% increase. And the untreated water through the agency-owned facilities goes up from $4.71 to $4.95 or $5.07. Mojave Water Agency cost of water there, treated water goes up from $16.94 to $17.79 or $18.22. And the Acton service area goes up from $7.48 to $7.86 or $805. The rates for subsequent years go up by the 5% or the 7.5% scenario in each year, depending on the scenario that the board chooses to implement. And that basically concludes my presentation for today. We can have any more questions and discussion. Be glad to answer any questions you may have here.
Okay, I think that's a pretty thorough discussion. Much different than it used to be, years ago. We used to look at the labor cost, state cost, the chemical cost, and so there's a lot more involved in it now. And I'm not sure if it's all correct or not, but anyway, it's a very thorough presentation. And so I think at this point, we would ask for any, comments or statements, by the public, anybody's, it's here at the agency or listening in, now's the time to make your thoughts and your views, on. Okay, hearing none at this time, I think we go back to the, water rates, committee, and they reviewed this and what their recommendation is. And if there's any, after that, if there's any other questions from the board members. Okay, hearing no questions, I think it'd be in order, a motion to close the public hearing. Do we have a motion?
Mr. President, this is Rob. I move we close.
I'll second that motion.
Yeah, we have a motion and second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. 6:42, I think. Yeah, okay. Okay, now we get on to the next order of business is 8A2, approving water rates for the fiscal year 2024 through 2026. So I guess a motion would be in order, then we can have a discussion.
Mr. President, are you asking for a suggested rate to be put?
I think at this point that would be the appropriate and have a suggested rate, and that would be open for discussion.
Yeah, so if I could just add a couple things here. So on page 16 of your agenda packet is a staff report. Kind of talks about the process that we went through with the finance committee, and we did hold a customer meeting to seek input from our customers on the presentation you saw this evening. We met with the major customers, LA County Waterworks, Quartzville Water District, White Fence Farms, also California City, and U.S. Borax. Attended the workshop. We did not receive any written comments from any of the current customers on the recommended range of the rate adjustment. So if you look on page 17, we have the proposed resolution R23-19 that's written. You can see under the actual resolution, section B, there's items 1, 2, and 3. There's a blank there for each of the 3 years rate adjustment. So we left that blank, and it's really up to the board on what percent increase they want to show in this resolution for the next 3 years. That the table that Sadir went through under the two scenarios presented, the 5% and the 7.5%, is included on page 18. So depending on what percentage the board chooses this evening, we'll insert that into the resolution, and then we'll attach the appropriate table showing what the water rates are for the next 3 years. So, I'm sorry.
The committee's recommendation.
So the committee did not have a firm recommendation. They wanted to leave that to the full board to discuss this evening. So there was not a recommended percentage from the water rate committee.
Mr. President, can I ask a question again?
Yes.
The way this is worded, over and above the rate charged, so the rate charged in 22, right? 22, 23 was 5, right?
So the way this is worded, that's a good question. So if you look at item number 1 under section B, so whatever rate adjustment the board chooses this evening, 5, 7.5%, or somewhere in between, that percentage gets applied to the current rate. The current rate for M&I is $699 per acre foot. So that percentage applies to the current rate. And then item number 2 includes a percentage, and then it'll be that percentage times the current rate or the new rate adjusted for fiscal year 2024.
So you need the full amount of the new rate.
Yep.
If it was 5%, we'd put in 5%. If it was 7.5%, we'd put in 7.5%.
Yep. Yep. And the board could choose a combination of rates for the next 3 years. Doesn't have to be the same for each of the
It's
years.
effective January 1.
It's effective July 1st of 2023.
Oh, okay.
And Matt, these can all be reviewed from year to year
Correct.
if there's a need.
Yeah, and I would recommend that we do that, even if the board chooses to adopt the next 3-year rates for the agency, that we review this each year and see how we're doing.
We can change it.
We can change it at any time, but at least it gives I see the biggest benefit is to our customers. It lets them know what we're projecting and they can plan for their rates. So I see that as the biggest benefit.
You know, I don't want to stop recharging the groundwater basin. And I believe it's an insurance policy for everybody in the Antelope Valley to be able to have that money available. We don't know what from year to year anymore what kind of water we're going to get.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, if there's no further discussion, the motion would probably be in order. Now we've got A2, so that could either be one rate for the 3 years, or we could separate it.
Yeah, correct.
Mr. President, I had one more question, Matt, before we.
Yes, yeah, certainly.
What's the projection for how much of our reserve we're going to use this year to recharge the basin?
Roughly 13 million.
and then if we then we go to 5% next year, maybe another 15 million, maybe.
No, that decision hasn't been built into this model. So, that's another scenario. If next year is also wet, would we want to pull additional funding out of reserves to pay for recharge water?
Wouldn't the plan, we've talked about it in the past, but the plan is to put as much water as possible in the basin on wet years. So if we had another wet year, we could actually spend more than 13 million.
Yeah,
to put water into the basin next year, because we started a little bit late this year because we didn't know what the forecast.
Yeah.
And we had just come off a 5% year.
Exactly.
And then when would we recover that 13 million?
Over time, as we pump that water out and deliver it to our customers, then we charge the current or the then M&I rate to deliver that to our customers.
Right.
So, I wouldn't look at it as negative as it, we're spending that money out of reserves, because we're capitalizing that asset. Mm-hmm. So we're accounting for the investment. It's an investment for the agency and our customers.
Right.
Kind of putting our reserve into another savings that we can't pull out immediately, but we know it's going to be pulled out over time.
Yep.
I just want to mention, historically, we've been at 7.5%, and we were gracious and gave everybody a break at 2% and 5%. I would move that we make it 7.5%.
I second.
We have a motion and second. Is that for all 3 years?
For all 3 years.
Okay. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, there's one more thing I'd like to say. And thanks for the motion and the questions everybody's been giving. The other thing, too, we got to keep in mind that what's helped this agency over the years is that when we do have the water available in the ground, we're able to use it locally, and we were able to exchange table A water, our allocation 2-to-1. And if we go ahead and don't have that, we're not going to be able to have those opportunities. So I just want to bring that up too.
Okay. Is there any further board discussion? Okay, we have a motion to raise it for the 3 years, 7.5%. That can be looked at each year. Is that-
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, barring any further discussion, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. And we'll take approximately a 10-minute break at this time, and we'll come back. Director Vacancy Review Committee.
What did you say?
We're going to take about a 10-minute. Committee, and as I think most everybody's aware, one of the directors, Division 1, resigned in April 24th. Then we had to go through a procedure. They had a certain procedure to try to appoint a director or a special election. In absence of that, and I believe the Board of Supervisors make an appointment. And we had 3 very qualified, candidates. And going up, what I had seen in the interview, they were all excellent candidates, and all would, be more than qualified. So I think at this point, I'm going to ask if there's any of the directors they would like to talk about the candidates address. Yeah. Director Dice.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I reviewed all 3 applications and qualifications and come to the same conclusion that it's very fortunate to have such good candidates. It's a very tough decision to pick just one, fill our vacancy, and also we should thank all of our applicants for their interest in the position. However, it is my opinion that the most impressive qualifications belong to Mr. Drew Mercy. Therefore, with your permission, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Drew Mercy to fill our vacant Division 1 director's position.
Okay, first of that, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Mr. President, I will second that motion.
A second, Director Parrish. And at this point, I think we'll ask if there's any other directors who'd like to make any new statements or anything regarding this or any other candidates.
Director Miller, I agree with Director Dias. We had a lot of just really good qualified people asked to be considered. I want to make a note that, again, they're all very well qualified. I am leaning towards somebody who has the water experience within District 1 or it's Division 1 that could represent a portion of our valley, even though it fills in Division 1, the greater west area of Division 1 would be represented. So I'm leaning more towards Liz Valentine being considered. Just that's my thought.
Mr. President, can I comment, Bill?
Yes.
Yeah, I second the motion. I agree with everything that he said, that Elizabeth Valentine, Rick Norris would be excellent candidates. But I think Drew has the qualifications that we need, especially his knowledge of state government, county government, local government, and the ability to work within those governments. And what's happening with the state government with water law and everything, we need somebody on this board that has a very good understanding of what's going on with the state. And I believe that Mr. Mercy certainly within his interview and the knowledge I have of him has that experience that none of us here have. And then his involvement in the Valley. I've had the great pleasure to work with Mr. Mercy on the Allen Valley Fair, as some of the other ones of us have, and he's done an exceptional job. He was chairman of the board there, and finally his experience working with the legislators in our valley. I just think he has remarkable qualifications that could really help our board.
Good, excellent comments.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I had a comment. Gary Van Dam here, and I agree with Rob and Keith on that choice. I worked with Drew on a few different boards, and I appreciate all the candidates for wanting to join ABAC. It just shows what a good board we have. So, thank you.
Okay, I'd like to make a comment.
Okay,
So,
Director Donato.
yeah, I mean, nothing against Drew. I think Drew's, has been involved in a lot of things, and if it wasn't for the gerrymandering of the boundaries, so it would be George's district. Ms. Valentine has worked longer than most directors on this board, 20-some years, 22, 25 years as a board of director of West Valley Water District, and community leader, very tight, very close with the Centennial Development and Cajon Ranch. She lives in that district. She's right. That district is right. She lives right in the center of that district. But I'm not going to sit here and be derogatory. And if anybody, if the majority of the board feels that Drew's the person, that's fit, I'm going to go along with the flow. Okay, because the only reason have a split decision here or have a negative feeling, but in all fairness, I would say Lisa would have been a very good candidate too. Fortunate we had with Rick as well. We had three good people, and it was good to have that. We haven't had that in a long time, so that's it.
Okay. This is for the.
Let me respond. Nothing against the other candidates whatsoever. I would like to have female representation on our board. I love all these guys up here with me, and Drew and Rick would have been really can represent very well. I just have to cast my thoughts towards having a woman, another woman who replaced Shelley. So I'm not the Lone Ranger up here.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further, comments, we'll do a voice vote unless anybody would like to do a roll call vote.
Roll call vote.
Yes.
This is for the motion in the second.
Drew
Mercy. Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
No.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
Keith Dias,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yeah. Yes.
and George Lane.
Yes. Motion carried. Congratulations, Drew. And it was a little process. I think there's paperwork to sign, and you'll be, I think whoever the director was, they could be sworn in tomorrow. And hope you enjoy it, and I think you will. It's a good board, and anyway, we'll talk to you again in a year or two. Okay, but I think you'll enjoy it very much. Okay, well, I'm glad we got that done. We've been working on this for some time, so good job for the staff and the directors and the committees. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, Finance Committee, and Director Donato is chairman of that committee.
Okay. Finance Committee met last week, and first order 8C1, consideration of possible action to accept and file the check registry for May 11th through June 1st, 2023. And Matt's going to give us a rundown.
Yep. Thank you, Director Donato. So on page 44 is the beginning of our checklist. Just want to point out a couple of things. There was a lot of talk tonight about State Water Project and banking water. Item number 1 on the checklist is a payment to DWR. You'll see it's the variable cost associated with water deliveries in April. This was for delivery of about 9,000 acre feet during the month of April, and a majority of that water was banked. So that's about $2.3 million total for the month. Then if you go on page 50, a few pages back, you have a summary of the payments associated with the High Desert Water Bank project. These are all paid for out of the Metropolitan account and reimbursed by Metropolitan Water District. And Justin's going to give an update on the project this evening, but Finance Committee went through each of these payments and also went through the monthly summary report that's included in your packet this evening. So nothing else stood out in the checklist. It was all pretty routine items. Just wanted to make mention of that large $2.3 million payment to DWR. But be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, I'll move on board order 8C1, that we approve the checklist.
There's a motion, we have a second.
Director Miller seconds.
No further discussion, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried, thank you.
Okay, this brings us to 8C2, consideration of possible action on a purchase order with Power Flow Products for the purchase of 125 horsepower vertical turbine pump in the amount of $36,533. And our operations manager, Mr. Wozegan, is going to explain what we're doing there.
All right, thank you, Director Donato. Good evening. So this is an easy one, easiest thing you'll do all night. We have two pumps in a vault outside the back gate that supply water to these two buildings and to the treatment plant, domestic water. One pump was replaced about 7 years ago by DRC. The second pump is the original. It's about 50 years old, and it's leaking. We've had to isolate it. So we've looked for this pump, and we did find a direct replacement pump. There will be no fabrication needed. We can come in on a Saturday, swap it out when nobody's here, and our maintenance department will be the ones to do that work. There's one place to get this pump, Power Flow Products, and we tried getting it from Brax, a couple other distributors. They would have to go to Power Flow to get this pump because they're the distributor. So anyway, we don't have a lot of choice, but at least our maintenance department will do all the replacement work with that. So we'd ask you to consider awarding this to Power Flow in that amount that Frank said.
I have a question. How come we don't have that rewound?
It's not the motor that's bad. It's the pump itself. The pump itself is worn out.
The bowls?
The casing. It's not a deep vertical turbine like a well. It's a vertical turbine, but it's very short.
Oh.
And everything's worn out below the motor. Yeah.
How deep is it?
It's not that deep. It's top to bottom. It's about 8 feet, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, like a submersible pump for them.
Not a submersible, but it's in an underground vault for sure. Yeah.
John, how old is it?
Close to 50.
You might need a new one.
Did we put that on variable speed controllers? Or to where they don't pump, they just use the electric that they demand?
Yeah, on these pumps in particular, Gary, they only come on, they pump into that hydro tank, so they're not running constantly. They only come on when that level gets to a certain point.
So they just shut off.
Then they shut off. Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make a motion, we approve the board order.
I second.
We have a motion and a second to the board order in the amount of $36,533. If there's no further discussion, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you.
Presentation, John.
Okay, item 8C3, consideration of possible action on the solar arrays operation or maintenance agreement with Ingy, is that how you pronounce it? Ingy Services. And this is Jesse Wising going to give us an update on that.
All right. Thank you, Director Donato. Good evening, President Lane, members of the board. This is a operation maintenance agreement with NG Services. The Finance Committee has reviewed this item multiple times, and I think we've come to a recommendation from the committee to the board. But for some background for all of you, I'm sure you know this, but we have 4 solar facilities at the agency, totaling about 5.5 megawatts of capacity. Those are located, of course, here, the solar shade structure above our parking lot here at Fort Sill. We also have 2 sites at our west side water bank and 1 at our east side water bank. Those facilities were constructed under an agreement with Optera, who are now known as NG. And those facilities all were online as of February 1st, 2019. So when we entered the construction agreement with NG, we also entered a 3-year operation and maintenance agreement with them that covered from February 2019 through February of 2022. And that was triggered once all the facilities were online. So that covers all of the regular inspection, testing, and maintenance of the electrical equipment, panel washing, as well as performance monitoring so that they can respond to any issues that they notice if the production goes down, as well as managing the warranties with the manufacturers of the equipment. As I mentioned, that expired in February of 2022. We began working with NG to get a renewal agreement. Sorry, my clicker's jumping around on me here. There we go. And so we've gone around with them. They did provide an agreement with to us. The system has actually underperformed to date by about 10%, and that's primarily due to warranty issues that we've had on the trackers not following the sun. The Finance Committee wanted to make sure that we were receiving that in accordance with that agreement prior to bringing an operation and maintenance agreement to the full board. And so when that check was received, we did bring that information to the Finance Committee to review this one more time, and they are recommending to renew the agreement. That agreement is for the first year, $71,483 to do all the maintenance activities I mentioned previously. That will escalate by 3% per year for up to 4 additional years. But AVEC does have the option to cancel that operation and maintenance agreement anytime prior to a renewal. That renewal agreement will preserve the performance guarantee within that original contract. Because NG is on the hook to pay for any underperformance of the system, it will also serve to incentivize NG in making sure that any performance issues leading to a decline in production are rectified quickly in both their interest and AVAC's best interest. So with that, as I mentioned, the Finance Committee is recommending renewing the operation and maintenance agreement with NG for that first year cost of $71,483. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah. How many years will they pick up the shortfall?
That goes through the life of the contract. I think it's 20 years.
20 years. Mm-hmm. The average solar panels last for how long?
20 to 30, yeah. Well, I didn't hear that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're gonna average differently here than say down in the coastal area.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
The wind here just beats them up.
So we had a three-year basically contract with them, and then we're extending this. Is that what?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. When we did the original construction.
How come we just didn't go with an extension and go with the long one at the get-go?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I don't know if it was considered, if it wasn't offered. I don't know. That was a little bit before I got involved.
So how many year extension are you wanting?
Well, this is a 5-year term within the existing contracts. The cost increases each year 3%, and we can get out at any time. Yeah, we're not
for the first 3 years. How much? 71,000 or?
Yeah, it started off I think about 65,000 and increased 3% within that original contract as well. So this is in line with that.
Right. That's what I was thinking. We just do one big one right up front, and then we don't have to do these extensions and everything. But maybe consider that next time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Is there any further questions from the board? Hearing none, we have a motion in order for 8C3, the amount of $71,483 for the year one.
This is Director Not, I'll move.
I'll second. Motion by Director Not, second by Director Van Dam. No further discussion. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that finishes the Finance Committee.
Yeah. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Frank. And we'll go back to you, Frank, at the Edison Water Bank.
Yes, so on 8D1, monthly update report on the High Desert Water Bank and the project. And again, to Justin, give an overview.
All right. Thank you again. Yeah, this is our typical monthly update report that we've been providing to the board on a monthly basis for the High Desert Water Bank project. And as General Manager Knudsen mentioned earlier, there's a monthly report included within your board packet that summarizes some of the activities that have occurred at the project over the last month, as well as some photos. So we've got some more recent photos included within this presentation, but that monthly report's put together by our construction management team. It's a pretty good, thorough report. So getting into our executive summary, we've got our project objectives listed at the top, 70,000 acre feet of put and take into the recharge basins per year, and overall storage capacity of 280,000 acre feet. The map is shown on the right. That hasn't been changed in recent months, really, but it shows the locations of the recharge basins. The stars indicate the recovery wells that have been drilled to date. And then you can see some of the large diameter bidirectional pipelines shown in blue. The left-hand side of this slide shows some of the short-term goals that staff and our contractors and consultants are working towards over the next 3 months. Completion of the aqueduct turnout construction is pretty imminent. That should be done in the next few weeks. Construction of the recharge basins and pipelines will continue into 2024, but they'll continue to make great progress on that. And Metropolitan Water District will consider an agreement to add the additional costs of the project due to inflation, as well as some added factors which were not included within their original contract, such as the offsite power costs. And then, so we will execute an agreement, an amendment to our existing agreement, as will they. Item 4 there is another agreement that AVEC will enter into with the water master to store water at the High Desert Water Bank, which is a requirement under the adjudication. And then number 5 is probably the most exciting milestone on here, which is to begin recharge within that stage 1 recharge area. The contractors on site have a milestone to meet, and that target date is July 10th to begin recharging water within what we call the stage 1 area, which on the map is this southeast corner of the project site right there. So we're very excited to do that. Yes, sir.
Now, what quantity will we be able to recharge there?
We can do almost 100 acre feet per day is the projection out there. Yep.
Super, thanks.
Yeah. Moving into section 2, program management. Kennedy Jenks is serving as the program manager for the project. So some of the activities that they've been participating shown on the left side of the table here, continuing to participate in all of our progress meetings, continuing to track and reviewing the overall project progress, making sure that everybody's on task and aware of any upcoming deadlines or dates that need to be aware of. We had an update call with Metropolitan Water District a few weeks back and updated them on the progress of the call of the project. And Kennedy Jenks participated in that as well. And then Stantec, the design engineer, recently provided us a 30% design package for the well electrical equipping and small diameter well recovery pipeline package. That is currently being reviewed by Kennedy Jenks as well as AVEC staff to provide some comments back to Stantec on that. The right-hand side shows the upcoming board decisions, just for you to be aware of, kind of on the horizon for some of these things. We talked about the top 2 already, which is the storage agreement with the water master and the amendment with Metropolitan Water District. And then item C I threw on there as a typical matter of process, but once the contractor is completed with the turnout construction, the AVEC board will issue a notice of completion for that project, and then ultimately release the retention that we've withheld from their progress payments. Section 3 kind of highlights some of the engineering work that Stantec's been doing. They continue to work with the contractors on responding to any requests for information and reviewing submittals on the project. They participate in our construction progress meetings. They were also on the call with Metropolitan to update them on the progress of the project. They're beginning to work on the next groundwater model update. And so this update will incorporate all of the data collected in the 6 recovery wells that were drilled through 2022. And as I mentioned already, they submitted that 30% design package to AVAC for us and Kennedy Jenks to begin reviewing. This might be a little small to see, but this is the contract summary that we provide each month when we present this to the board. You can see a list of who the contractor or vendor consultant is, what the type of project or what their contract is that they're working on, and then the total contracts amounts, the payouts to date, and then the percentages of what those represent. So those have all been updated with the most recent numbers. You can see on there that I guess the one new thing, I'm not sure why I didn't do this in last month's update, but the well drilling package number 2, I've tagged now as complete. That was obviously closed out back in December. So I just noticed that, updated that one. But the other completed projects are down here at the bottom, so we'll probably drop that down. But you can see, and TN has a construction progress update, but on the contracting side, we've got Nicholas Construction, as far as progress goes, about 33% through payments, and then Blois doing the turnout 70% as far as their payment progress goes. And then the capital program account, Matt highlighted some of the payments on the Metropolitan Capital Program account from the checklist. This is the activity through that account. So those payments have been summarized within the payments through May and June on this list. But you can see we had large amount of payments there in June. That was shown on that list. Our balance right now on that account is just under $1 million. We do have an outstanding invoice to Metropolitan Water District of just over $5 million to replenish that balance. And they've been good about making timely payments to us. So we'll have the funds available to pay our next round of consultant and contractor invoices. And I'm going to turn it over at this point in time to Tien Ng, our construction manager who works for Kennedy Jenks, to go through the construction slides. Tien, go ahead. Are you muted?
Can you hear me?
There you go.
Oh, okay. Yep. Thank you, Justin. Good evening, directors, general managers. This evening here, we have 2 projects to update. The first one is the Aqueduct Turnout Turn-In project. And as Justin alluded earlier, this project is close to completion. So there's a few things to do for the contractor, such as for the turnout turn-in structures. They need to finish the handrail, install the water screens. For the control building is install the HVAC, do interior painting. The meter vault, install the hatches. Flow meter is completed. Steel pipes done. Fiber optic is done. And they had just set up startup on June 30th. So what we envision is after June 30th, the contractor should be very close, maybe some minor punch list item, because we issue punches as we go. We don't want to linger. So probably early July, they'll be packing up, move their trailer, move their container box, and so forth. Next slide. Here's a photo looking from the aqueduct, looking from, I guess, south to north. And you can see the right in front of you at the bottom, those new concrete liner that was just installed. They're white. And then followed by the aqueduct turnout turn-in structures. You can see there's still handrails that need to be done because you can still see the yellow temporary handrail. Looking to the north, where that concrete structure is, that's the meter vault. To your right is the control building. The roof is also done. They still have some compacted material that needs to be done in between the turnout structure and the meter vault, and also minor paving. I think they're going to finish that next week. Next slide. Here's looking at a different angle, a closer looking at the control building and the meter vault. And also at the end there, you see those fencing that matching DWR current fencing requirement. Those are also installed. Next slide. And here's the delineations between the turning contractor and the recharge contractor. And you see the open pipe area. They're going to leave that for the next contractor to tie it in. As you can see, the second pipe, there's a dish head put on. Is the recharge contractor. Once they finish the piping, that's where they're going to close it up, pressure test their pipe before removing the dish head, and they do have a connector piece to connect that on. Next slide. The second project, stage 1, stage 2 recharge system improvement. As Justin mentioned earlier, the stage 1 piping, the contractor is targeting to be able to finish that on June 10th. That also our target date to be able to start recharging stage 1 basins. For stage 2, they still got ways to go. For the basins, they need to work there till June 10th of next year. June 10th of next year for basin 2021, and then finishing a little bit sooner for basins 23 through 27. That's on May of next year. So stage 2 piping, they're planning to start on July 10th, thereabout, and they need to about April 1st of next year to be able to finish that. Next slide. Here's a aerial view of looking at Avenue B. I just want to show you that last week they started doing the Avenue B piping. This is last week's photo. As of today, that trend is completely dug. The pipe is laid down. Now they need to go in there and start welding this week. And then at the end of that, there's another turnout structure called structure number 2 that they need to complete. Next slide.
Can you wait, please? It would have been better if you had an arrow or something. All we see is a good field and.
Yeah. So Tien's pointed out that I know it's difficult to see in this aerial photo, but the pipeline's right in here.
I didn't know what. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, in the future, just put it like a blue line. So we know that's the water line.
Okay.
That would be helpful.
Yeah. It's this aerial photos. Tough to see the magnitude, but yeah, maybe an inset too of us, maybe a closer up photo.
This is a aerial photo showing the 84-inch pipe. I believe directors, when you folks visited the site, it was a huge pipe trench. 50% of them it's already installed and they're backfilled. You see that tractor area? It's what Justin pointed is those are the 84-inch going all the way to Avenue A8. It's already done and backfilled. So now they're working towards the 96-inch. We think that by sometime this week, it might be completely backfilled. Next slide, please. This is turnout number 1. It's off of the 96-inch pipe. They installed the pipe. They haven't put on the riser can yet, but that's what a turnout number 1 looks like prior to backfill. Next slide. Remember last time when you folks visited the site, you see a bunch of area like deep depression with the existing where the prior driller did the piezometers and the wells. Now for stage 1 area, they're all raised up to the finished grade. And this is what it looks like. I just want to show you. If you go out to the site right now, those depression, those holes are gone. Justin, I believe that's the last slide for this month's construction update.
All right. Thank you, Tien. Any questions for Tien?
Yeah, I have a question for both of you. The water going to be delivered here in a couple weeks. We're still on schedule for July?
July 10th. Sorry, go ahead, Tian.
Oh, yeah, Director, yeah, right now we're pushing it to be on July 10 and thereabout. And as soon as, let's say, the contractor hit any difficulties and stuff, we definitely will inform AVAC.
Who's going to open that gate July 10th? Do they need a director to go out there and open that gate?
Yeah, I think Matt mentioned to the committee that Metropolitan Water District's thinking about setting something up, like type of a ribbon cutting type ceremony out there. So
yeah, we're still working on the details of it, but it sounds like they want to bring a couple of their board members, Metropolitan General Manager out and have a little ribbon cutting. Justin heard today through one of the staff that they're going to invite the governor out. So we'll see if that happens.
All of you first there to get the office.
All right.
Thank you. They'll be okay with us having our AVAC banner behind it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So that turnout, that's just a big, then it'll be on a meter, 100 acre feet.
There's a meter right there at the aqueduct. That'll be the main meter. But yeah, each of the discharges will be metered as well.
And then when that flows into the bank, how does that work? It's just like comes out the top then?
So
the soil?
Yeah, this picture here, Tian can jump in, but this is the discharge area right here, right, Tian? So there's a discharge structure that'll be fitted on top of that, right? That riser right here. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Then they put something around that so it doesn't. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Dissipate the energy and some rip wrap. Yeah.
So it doesn't erode.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. And dissipate.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we appreciate it. Good presentation.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Oops, I think I'm going the wrong way.
Okay, we'll move on to 8E1. Matt, is that something that you put on the agenda?
That is. It's pretty benign, but on page, I can't read this. It's 96, page 96 of your agenda packet. So we received this notice from a staff member at ACWA, Association of California Water Agencies, and they have their board seat and or president and vice president seats are coming up for ACWA. And they need to designate and make sure they have documentation on who has authority to cast a vote for each of the member agencies. So AVAC being a member agency of ACWA, we received this notice, and we need to designate somebody to receive the ballot and cast the vote on behalf of the agency. So the default person is the general manager for the agency. And my thought is we keep it as the default. So the notice comes to me about the vote, but I will, once we know who the candidates are, we'll go through our normal process of having a committee make a recommendation to the board. So we have some time. I just wanted to make sure I received authorization to be the designated person to receive the ballot and vote.
You need a board order on this?
Yeah, it'd be good, just so it's documented for ACWA.
Is a motion in order?
Mr. President, I move approval of Board Order 8E1.
Motion by Rob Harris, Director Parrish.
Director Miller, second.
Director Miller, second. There's no further discussion. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried.
Thank you.
I don't remember ever seeing this in the past, so it's.
Yeah, maybe Dwayne just went for it. I know.
Okay.
Do you think that maybe Dwayne voted twice and that's
Somebody got in trouble.
Yeah, somebody got in trouble.
Moving on, Matt, still with you, General Manager's report?
Yeah, so we got a brief report this evening. I'm going to let Peter, as the assistant, cover the State Water Project presentation this evening. So take it away, Pete.
Thank you, President Lane, members of the board. Just a brief update, Oroville is at 100% capacity. So that's significant. It has been being suppressed at a lower capacity due to wanting to have air storage for flood control. So currently, though, it's at its 100% capacity. Hasn't been there since 2017. They do anticipate that it's going to remain at full capacity until the fall when they start releasing for more flood control storage within the reservoir. So next slide, please.
Oh, did you have a question?
Well, no, I just want to say, why don't they just put it in Sykes Reservoir? I mean, you know.
Working on that. Yeah. So this is an interesting graph, and I also have to just give my thanks here. Tom Barnes and Pam put these good slides together. It captures the blue line is the water level, and the red line is the storage, the maximum storage level based on flood storage that's needed within Oroville Reservoir. So you can see that they've kind of been balancing releases pretty much since around looking at the April timeframe in order to keep that flood storage available. Now they've hit the period of time where they're just keeping the inflows and the outflows the same, and they're going to do that up until we hit about October. You can see on the very edge of that graph, on the right end of that graph, that it starts to dip back down, those dotted lines. That's when they'll be required to make more releases to increase that storage for flood control. That's significant to us because this year they're talking about having Article 21 available in the fall. That will likely coincide with those releases in Oroville later this year in October. So it'll be a pretty unique year. We may have Article 21 through July and start back up again in October. All right, next slide, please. All right, and there's not too much new here. We're still at 100% in San Luis. We anticipate pretty much staying really high level, almost maxed out throughout the end of the year. That's part of what's going to make that Article 21 available. I mean, another way to think of Article 21 is instead of having a 100% year based on the amount that we project taking in of the excess water, it's like a 120% year for AVEC. If we get more Article 21 in October, that could expand to a 130% year, essentially. Pretty significant. This may be the highest Article 21 year on the books. We're already at 400,000 acre feet distributed this year. Next slide, please. All right, and this kind of just goes over what we've been doing so far. And that's about 2,000 acre feet a week in deliveries of Article 21. We do anticipate that now going through July. So that's something that has progressively changed through each of our board meetings where the state has come out and said, hey, through May, we'll have Article 21. Then it was through June. Now they're talking about through July. This may not be the last time they extend it, just based on the amount of snowpack they have and the runoff that just keeps coming. We've upped our anticipated take of Article 21 to 33,000 acre feet for the year. That's what we're anticipating. That assumes that it runs through July. And we've delivered 21,000 acre feet to date. So it's a significant amount that we've been able to take advantage of as an agency. Next slide, please. All right. So, and this kind of tells that story. So we are looking at what's available to AVEC and how we plan to distribute that. So we anticipate this year 38,000 acre feet customer deliveries. We also are looking at what we can maximally take through our recharge facilities, and that's between that 55,000 and 60,000 acre feet. We still have some minor exchanges on the books that we may be able to make. And we anticipate carrying over 20,000 acre feet in San Luis Reservoir. After all of that, is taken care of, there's still 50,000 to 55,000 acre feet of surplus table A that we don't necessarily want to carry over in San Luis because we would risk it. So currently staff is working on kind of a smorgasbord of options for dealing with all that surplus water, and it involves transfers and storage, both dry year programs and just transfers for sales. So we're anticipating bringing that back to committees and board over the next month. And I think that concludes my piece, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on that.
All right. Thanks, Pete. And then just to wrap up the GM report today, we have the Water Master meeting coming up on Wednesday, the 28th here at AVAC. We will have one more board meeting before then, so we'll go through that agenda because there's a number of topics coming up that we need to make sure we get AVAC board direction for our representative at that meeting. So we'll do that on the 27th of June. And then obviously 4th of July holiday coming up on July 4th. That's all we have. Thank you, Pete. And we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, if there's no further questions from General Manager, we'll move on to Director's reports. Is there anything to report? Move on to Attorney's report.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Request for future agenda items? Not at this time. Do we have a need for closed session?
We don't.
Okay.
Yep.
That brings us down to adjournment to our regular board meeting of June 27th, 5:30. We have a motion?
Mr. President, Mr. Rob, I move we adjourn.
Director Ferris, we have a second.
Director Miller, second.
Okay, Director Miller, second. Okay, there's no further discussion. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you, everybody.